Hey there, welcome back to my studio for day 2 of the Artwork Living 5-Day Painting Challenge. I'm so glad to have you here. Today we're going to be talking about how to use cues to create the painting habit. So let's review real quickly what steps help you form a habit. So there were 7 steps that I talked about yesterday. They were make it easy to get started and set your goals so that you know your why. Number 3 was to establish cues. That's what we're going to dive into really deeply today. Number 4 was use a standard routine. Number 5 was to reward yourself. 6 was to track your progress, and 7 was to make yourself accountable. So there's 7 basic steps to creating that habit, or that runway or channel, if you want to think about it that way, to creating a real strong habit. Habits are built, they don't happen by accident. So I want to talk about what cues are. Cues are brain triggers. So our brain operates on autopilot most of the time. 90% of what you do during the day is habitual. It's stuff that you have created, consciously or unconsciously, habits around. So what we're working on this week is creating the habit of painting through doing a 20 to 40 minute study a day. Remember, they don't have to be perfect, they just have to be done. So you probably already have some cues that you use consciously or unconsciously going into the studio. So here are some of them that work for me, ones that I've had for a long time. First one is that I have a separate space for my studio. So going into a different space and place, moving into a different space, is a cue to my mind that I'm shifting gears, that I'm moving into another avenue or another direction, another pursuit. I don't do computer work, for example, here in my main studio. I have a separate office in another room with a desk, and that's where I do computer work. Because if I do computer work in the studio, then that's going to tell me that going into the studio is computer time. Don't want to do that. You do not want to be playing on Facebook while you're trying to paint. So make sure that you, even if you have your studio in your home, that you have separate areas for those things so that you make that transition. So moving to a separate space is a really strong trigger or cue. So you can set specific times or places. That's one of the first ways that you can create a trigger. So if you have a separate space, if you have a specific time of day that you use to go and do studio work, that will act as a trigger. So if you go to the studio to paint every day at 9 o'clock, from 9 even just till 10, that becomes a trigger. Doesn't matter what time it is, as long as there's consistency to it. Doesn't matter what place, as long as there is consistency to it. So work on that time and place part is a trigger. That's a really fairly easy one to set up. We can all do that no matter where our studio space is. The second thing that you can do to set triggers is to think about what they call floating triggers. And these are things that you use and build in a sequence to set the stage for an activity. So one of my prime floating triggers is coffee. And this goes back to my graduate school days. I associate making coffee with studio time, because in graduate school, every morning when I got to school to my studio to work, I would go to my mentor's studio and we would make coffee and talk about our day's work before we got started. So when I smell coffee brewing in the morning at the studio, I know it's time to get to work. Even doing that at home makes me want to go paint. At least go do something towards my painting practice. So coffee becomes a cue because it has, over time, and this is over 30 years, become a sequencing trigger that leads to an activity. So it could be anything you do that leads to that activity. Think about and make a list of the things that you normally do in getting ready to paint. This right here is another one of my triggers. It's my painting apron, and this is my new one. It's only a year old. I had the same painting apron for about 20 years. I had to get rid of it not long ago because it really could stand up on its own. It was so caked with paint. But I hated getting rid of it because it had become such a trigger for me to go to work. Putting on an apron is a mental trigger for me to get me in the mood that helps to create flow. So you probably are already doing something like that. If you have an apron that you put on when you get ready to start, that's a trigger. And if you can consciously stack these things, it makes it that much easier to get in the flow. Those of you who know how I paint, especially y'all who are my students, know that I always mix my paint. I don't know if you can see my cabaret over there, but I keep the paint in my palette box, and I mix the paint at the beginning of the session. That act of mixing color is another sequential cue. It's another trigger for me, so that it's a transition from regular busyness to the more present type of state that painting is. So when I stack all of those things together, I have a really nice transition from regular busy time, computer time, Facebook, Instagram, blah, 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 to painting time, which is much quieter. Another thing that you can do, the third thing that will really help creating these cues or triggers, is thinking about things that appeal to your senses, your sense of sight, smell, touch, sound, etc. So if you think about the senses and even those sequential triggers, or the first ones, time and space, that I talked about, a lot of those also appeal to the senses. But things that appeal to the senses will directly impact how fast you're going to move into that state of flow. So think about my coffee thing, and it really is a thing. I almost can't paint without coffee. So coffee appeals to my sense of smell as soon as it starts brewing, particularly if it's a kind of hazelnut, because that was what we used to drink in grad school. I don't drink that all the time. It's just too much. Flavored coffees are not that much of a thing for me, but they definitely are in the studio. The smell of that anywhere takes me straight to the studio. The taste of it, coffee has a taste. The taste of it becomes a trigger. So that smell and taste, the sound of the coffee pot brewing becomes sound. Other sound triggers can be things like music. I listen to music while I paint, and it tends to be music that relates to either the mood that I'm trying to create, the experience that I had, or something to do with the culture that I'm trying to invoke in my paintings. So I can frequently be found rocking out to Bruce Springsteen if I want to raise my energy up, or really laying back to something like the Low Country Blues. So using music and appealing to your hearing can also become a trigger. You might want to use one particular song every day as you get ready to start painting to really get you into that mood. If you've got a favorite song, put it into the comments here. How many of you listen to music? How many of you listen to audiobooks or podcasts or YouTube? One of my other favorite things to listen to while I paint is YouTube videos. I love listening to YouTube videos of other artists talking about their work. So there are a number of videographers who record artists talking about their work. There are a number of podcasts about artists talking about their work. All of those can help feed your creativity when you're in the studio. So definitely music. Music definitely impacts me, all the way from classical to everything else. I listen to a broad range, but it has a tendency to be what I'm trying to invoke in the experience. So think about the other senses. So we have sight. Oh, right now we're talking about sound, taste, smell. Think about sight. Think about having things in your studio that are inspiring. They could be reproductions of famous artworks that really feed your soul. So at different points I've had reproductions or copies of Constable's paintings hanging up in the studio, or Turner's, contemporary artists' works, but I have things where I can see them while I'm working. Not to copy them at all, but to have that visual become a trigger. It can be a really, really strong trigger. And if you look behind me, you'll see that I have my own paintings hanging around in the studio as well. And part of that is to remember where I've come from and where I'm going. The one that's right over my shoulder behind me is 20 years old. It goes back a long way to the work that I did right after graduate school. But looking at that painting reminds me of how much has changed and how much has stayed the same. So there's a lot of similarity in that painting to what I do now. There's a sense of light, there's a sense of drama, there's a sense of value. So things stay the same, but things change. Remember to feed your soul with where you've been and where you're going to. If you're not sure of what to do with a painting, pop it up on the wall so that you can look at it, take it in, and usually the painting will speak to you and you figure out what you want to do with it. So sight, hearing, taste, smell. What else do we have there? See if I'm listening. Sight, hearing, sound, taste, and smell. All 5 senses. What about touch? What about the feel of things? What could you have in the studio that appeals to your sense of touch that becomes a trigger? Well, for me, it's the feel of the apron as I put it on and the act of tying it, the action. This one feels a little different than my last one, so I'm getting used to it. But even changing the feel of something can change your mood a good deal. So those triggers that you can build on are, first, time and space, working in the same place and working at the same time, because it's time to go work now. It's in the space that I work now. This is where I work. Second, you can use sequential triggers, things that come before, and it could be anything. It could be opening up your favorite book of quotes and reading a quote every morning before you get started. It's anything that builds that pattern of getting down to work. Then the third thing is appealing to your senses. So I want you to think about how you can use those cues today as you're working on your 20-minute painting, 20 to 40-minute painting, and begin to build those up to form that painting habit so that you've got a channel to work through to get into a state of flow in painting that you don't have to think about overly hard, that you can set yourself up to almost effortlessly get into that state of mind where painting becomes easier, where you're more confident in what you're working on, and you can paint more loosely. So just a reminder about the challenge. The idea is to paint one every day, to paint a 20 to 40 minute study. So start at 40 minutes and shave time off every day. I do recommend that you stop at 20 minutes and take a photo of it, and then if you want to keep working on it, do. But don't overwork it. Remember, it's a study. Remember, done is better than perfect. Remember that accountability really helps. So if you want some accountability, pop over to the Artwork Living free Facebook group, and we'll get you in there, and you can post your painting every day and see what everybody else is doing. There are more than 1,000 people doing the challenge. So if you want to have some accountability with people who are working on the same thing and really get inspired, because there are tons of wonderful paintings over in there, join the group. Hop in, share your painting. If you don't want to share, you do not have to. The only competition here is with yourself. It's not about competing with other people. It's about making a change in the way that you paint and building your own painting studio framework so that you set yourself up for success in the studio. If you haven't joined the challenge yet, it is not too late. It started yesterday, but if you join today, you'll get the day 1 prompt today, and you can keep on going as long as it takes you to get through the 5 days. You can join at any point through the end of the month. So, what's holding you back? What are you going to do to set those cues up to create that habit? If you've got a question, pop it into the comments, and I am going to hop in there right now and see what I can see about those questions. I have my iPad right here so I don't have to mess up my phone, and I can hopefully catch the questions that are coming in. Let's see if I can get it to refresh so I can see those. Sometimes it cooperates and sometimes it doesn't. Now it's working. Yay. That are coming in. Let me turn down the sound so that we won't have multiple sounds coming in at the exact same time. Emily says she usually uses a folk station. Yeah, Pandora is wonderful for this, and so is Spotify. I have a Spotify playlist that I use too, and I've got one that's mellow when I'm a little wired and I need to calm it down, and then I have another one that is energizing and brings me up. So I would create some playlists that address all the different kind of moods that you might be in at that one time. So they definitely help. Nicole says, what is the group called again? It is Art Work Living. I'm going to post the link up here in the comments, in the description. Let me see if I can grab that really quickly as a link, and then that would make it so much easier. Sometimes I can do that and sometimes I can't. Let's see. I meant to put that in there ahead of time. Let's see if I can. Oh, darn it, it won't let me copy. Sorry. I will just type it right here, Nicole, in the comments, and that'll make it a little bit easier. If you do a search for art plus work, make sure you've got the pluses in there. We have a couple of look-alike groups that are not us, so make sure it's the one that's associated with me. There you go. Thank you, Nancy, for putting that in there. Yeah, it can take a few minutes to get in, so if you click the join button right now, my assistants are manning that, and as fast as they can, they're punching allow and letting people in. Thank you, Mary Ruth. That is wonderful. Mary Ruth just posted the link in there. Thank you so terribly much. So if you want to join the group, and it's ongoing, it goes past the challenge. We do the challenge once every 4 months, 3 times a year. So, but it is a very supportive group. It's a wonderful group of people. It's big, but it's really supportive. So you'll get a lot of great feedback in there and a lot of support as well. Any other questions that y'all might have about the challenge? I know one that I got yesterday was whether it was medium specific. And I want to remind everybody, it is not. You can work in any medium you want to during the challenge. It is not just about painting even. You could be working in drawing, you could be working in clay, you can be working in anything. You just want to make sure that you are working quickly. Yeah, and Victoria says, indeed you do. I accidentally hit art-work living, and it's definitely not me. No, it was somebody who left and created an imitation group. We have a couple of those, unfortunately, and there's no way to get them down that I know of. I've asked them to remove it, and they haven't done it yet. Gina says, are abstracts okay? Absolutely. Your subject matter can be anything you want to. There are several people who are doing more abstractive work and some that are doing fully non-objective work. So it is completely up to you. The only thing I want you to work on is working more confidently, which means working faster and letting go of the fear of failure, because during 5 days, you're not all going to be perfect. But because you're doing 5 in 5 days, the chances of you having one that turns out to be a really exciting image that you want to lead to another painting is really pretty good. One of my mentors used to tell us in grad school that if we wanted to be successful painters, we were going to be a lot better off making 100 paintings in a year and throwing 50 of them away. That we would have a better chance of making 50 good paintings if we did that. Because he saw lots and lots of professional artists make each painting so precious and so perfect that it hung them up. They might paint 50 paintings, but they were so tight on making each one perfect that only about 10 would be good. So paint more often, and you'll have more successes. It works really, really well that way. Linda says, can you speak to how to prevent the feeling anxious when you post a painting in the group that you struggled with? Absolutely. I'm not sure if you're the one who posted it this morning or yesterday, Linda, or not, but somebody posted a painting that they felt like was a complete flop. And I thought, bravo, kudos for doing that. A, because it takes a great deal of courage to post something you think doesn't work. B, because she immediately got reinforcement from the entire group. The painting really wasn't a flop, and I didn't think it was a flop either. She felt like it was overworked and a hot mess and had gone too abstract. It was actually a really exciting painting. There were a lot of dynamic marks in it. The colors worked really well. Yes, it was abstracted, but it definitely gave you the feeling of the experience of a garden of flowers. So know that when you post in that group, people are not allowed to be jerks. We delete people who are jerks. So we have a rule for critique in there, and I'm going to remind everybody of it again today. I haven't seen anybody be jerks on the daily paintings yet, but I want to get ahead of it and make sure. So Linda, I'll look for yours when I hop off. But the critique sandwich is the way to go when you're looking at that. So think about what works well before you look at what is not working. Only look at what's not working after you've identified 3 things that do work. So my advice for the person who was not satisfied with their painting was, don't scrape it. Look at it. Identify 3 things that you find interesting in that painting, and 3 things that you think need to be addressed. Then turn the painting against the wall, hide it, put it away. Don't look at it for the rest of the week. Chances are when you come back at the end of the week and look at it with fresh eyes and some distance, you'll find there's an awful lot more there that works than doesn't work. So, don't worry about that. People post angry faces most of the time by accident, so don't worry about that. That's not a problem at all. The link is here in the comments, Elaine, and I'm going to post them up in the description as soon as we hop off. So if you scroll back up through the comments, you'll see that the link to the group is right in there. I'm also going to post the link to join the challenge in there. In the description up above, but it is in the Facebook group as well. It's posted right at the top. It's pinned at the top of the group. So it's right in there if you want to get some information on that. Hey, Jane Wolf, it's good to see you here. I love seeing the students popping up into the Facebook Lives. So, Jane, have you started your painting for the day yet? Ha, ha, ha. I am going to be diving into some more clouds because we got some great cloud shots before and after the storm here. Jules says, I had not really been conscious of these triggers, but they've been there all along. Absolutely. I mean, we've all got them, whether we're conscious of it or not. But once you're conscious of it, then you can really build on it and take advantage of it. So, yeah, whenever you're not sure about something that's going on with your painting, Ramari, look at it, identify 3 things that work first. There are always 3 things that work. I've taught for more than 30 years. I have never, with maybe one exception, in 30 years, not been able to find 3 things that worked. So definitely 3 things that work in every single painting. When you find those, then it's much easier to look at what might need to change and be addressed. And it's usually not things that don't work, it's things that need to be addressed. When you frame it that way, your brain can take it in better. It does not work to start into a litany of what you hate about a painting, yours or anybody else's. So make sure you're following that for yourself too. 3 things first, and then look at what needs to be addressed for any painting at all, whether you think it works or whether you think it doesn't work. That helps tremendously. So let me make sure I'm not skipping any questions here because that moves so fast. Now, if you don't get feedback on your painting right away in the free group, understand there are more than 9,000 people in there. And it's moving really fast, and people are working really hard to get their daily paintings done, so you might not get any feedback right away from the group. But chances are people will come back in and respond to it. I can't respond to every last post that's in there, although I do get in there and respond to a lot of them, just because there are too many. So either me or my assistants will get in there and comment as much as we can, but know that if you don't get a comment on there, it does not mean it's awful at all. It just means that people haven't had a chance to see it yet. And the feed moves really quickly so that it may drop down before people have a chance to see it. Victoria says, when I was learning to play golf, our pro said, after a shot, always find 2 positive things to say. You had a good golf teacher, a really good golf teacher. This is true for anything that you're trying to learn that's new, because your brain doesn't process negativity. We can become really negative, but your brain doesn't process the negative. So if you tell yourself, don't paint muddy colors like that again, your brain hears, paint muddy colors like that again. So you have to be really careful with what you tell your brain. It's not productive to couch phrases in terms of don't, shouldn't, couldn't, wouldn't, and all the other bad stuff. Elaine says, don't see the group when I check for when you're live. I'm not sure what you mean, Elaine. The group, I'm going live on my Facebook page, not in the group. So that's why you don't see the group. In my first Facebook Live yesterday, you'll find a link for the group, and the link will be up here when I'm finished. I just haven't had a chance to post it there yet. And somebody in the group has already posted it here in the comments. So if you scroll backwards through the comments, you'll find that. Sarah, Instagram account too. Yeah, I have an Instagram account. I'm not sure what you mean. You can post it on Instagram, absolutely. I think that's a great thing to do. And extra bonus, if you post in there, hashtag Artwork Living Challenge. That way we can find those images on Instagram. I'm going to try to comment on as many of them as I can find on Instagram. I commented on some of them yesterday. But if you hashtag it, then I'll see it. Absolutely. So let me look on my iPad and see what else I might have missed. So yes, abstracts are okay. Absolutely. Try not to get anxious about anything that you post in the group. If anybody is ever rude, obnoxious, ugly, snotty, mean, bullying in the group, just report it to admin and we'll take care of it. We don't allow that. Jewel says, had not really been conscious of those triggers, but they've been there all along, as I said earlier. The trio of Colombian coffee, Louisiana swamp pop music, and my Maud Lewis Nova Scotia folk, I know Maud Lewis, folk art painting, do trigger my need and desire to paint. Very cool, very good. Jane, you'll have time to paint later this afternoon. I know, you got to do your oil change. Those are important things. Let's see. Linda says, can't go all the way back through the comments. Doesn't scroll all the way up. Yeah, Facebook does that sometimes. Try to refresh the page, and that'll make it a little bit easier to do that. I'm going to try to copy. It's not letting me copy and paste that right now. So just look back at the end of the presentation, and I'm going to get that posted into the comments, into the description right away. So Facebook is a real pain about being able to scroll through the comments. I have the same problem when I'm trying to get through there to see what other questions people might have. So we are almost out of time. So if you have any other questions about the challenge or about how to build those cues to help form that habit, leave the questions here, and I'll be checking back again a little bit later on today to see what other questions you might have. The replay is going to be available here on my page and on the replay page that we have for the challenge. So Happy painting, everybody, and I hope you dive into working on developing those daily painting practices and join us in the challenge. Bye-bye for now.